Hello Internet, and welcome to another episode of Experimental Cataclysm. This is the show where we talk about recent changes to the experimental version of Cataclysm Dark Days Ahead. Now this show will be quite short. Frankly, this is a product of my real life kind of getting in the way of my ability to work on YouTube, and to be honest, I do feel like I'm falling behind a bit on talking about all the changes we've been getting in the game. And I am sorry for that. I know that a lot of you don't follow the change logs, you just watch these videos, which I'm very appreciative for that, but I also know that I've been failing a little bit in my duties to relay information to you. And frankly, this is probably about to get worse because I'm going to be taking 2 weeks off from making YouTube content. The next proper video that will go up on the channel will be our next show in this series, so about 2 weeks from now. And I just wanted to give people the heads up so people don't get mad about it, although to be honest, people are just going to be mad about it anyway. But let's get into the show. You probably don't care about all this. So first up, I've been keeping an eye on the appliances that have been getting added to the game. We've had several additions. We now have a mini fridge and a mini freezer, as well as 2 different sizes of space heaters, and then finally we also have an electric forge. As with the other appliances that we've seen added to the game, these can be obtained through crafting. The mini fridge as well, I know appears in some vehicles, and this is the same item that is required for making the appliance, so you could potentially harvest one of these from an RV or wherever. Now the forge is actually even better because normally to install a forge in a vehicle you have to craft the intermediary item called the vehicle forge rig, and crafting that item required a fabrication and electronics skill of 4, which is not terribly high, but it's also not nothing. The appliance version, however, simply requires the electric forge item, which I know still spawns as a standalone item in the game, and you don't have to make that intermediary craft. So no crafting involved, you can just slap that thing onto the appliance and have a forge in your base. Now not only all of this, but Frizz also took over or reimagined, or I don't really know what to call it, but basically there was previously a PR for solar panels and batteries for the appliance system, but it was then closed, and Frizz has now followed through and added them to the game. So now you can install batteries directly into your wired base setup. When you examine the system, you will now see a display for the battery power that exists within your system. And honestly, this is great. This means that you will no longer need to power your grid using a vehicle or a generator. We're moving to a point where you can have a self-contained system in your base. Solar panels naturally can be used to generate power, and then you can store them in your batteries. And the battery forms for these appliances would be using storage batteries. That's the small, medium, standard, and large versions that you can find in vehicles. And of course, you can take apart larger storage batteries to get the smaller storage batteries. I think that's still in the game. Can you still disassemble those? Probably you can. And then of course, the solar panels themselves require the standard solar panel that you harvest and install in your vehicle. So overall, these additions to the appliance system are quite handy, and I'm particularly pleased about the batteries and solar panels. The appliances themselves will likely continue being expanded, and I also am happy to see that many of the new appliances use already existing items. And I think that this is a better way to do things rather than having each of them require their own new crafted item, and the standing lamp and the standing floodlight both require you to craft that new item. You can't simply take a flashlight or something and install a light like you can in a vehicle. Anyway, other than that, hopefully that made sense. I don't really have any other notes on this. So next up today, we have the ability to convert a Glock to full auto. Now I don't usually cover gun modification type stuff. If I'm being honest, most gun mods in the game are ultimately pretty bad and you don't actually want them. And this one, to be perfectly honest, isn't that much different because a full auto in this game is horrendous even when you're standing right next to your enemy. But anyway, this adds a new item called the Glock Auto Sear Plate, assuming I'm saying that right. And this is a gun mod that you can activate using the lowercase a key in the same way that you would install other gun mods. It does require a pistol skill of 2 in order to install, and the only thing it changes about the firearm is that it enables the use of the auto firing mode. And again, to be clear, full auto in this game is really very bad because your recoil ruins your aim and then you're not given a chance to recover before the next shot goes out. I did test this some, just spawning in random Glocks and adding the mod, and even with moderate skill I was still missing probably 75% of the shots from the auto firing mode. And even if the majority of them did hit your target, this would still be a horrible waste of ammunition. So personally, I think that you should just flat out never use this. But hey, apparently it's an easy thing to do in real life, so I have no gripes about it existing in the game. And the recipe does seem to apply to almost all of the Glocks we have in the game. I would have guessed that this would only work with certain models, but I also don't know, so I'll just assume it's fine. And the only reason I mention this at all is because the Glocks are by far the most common handgun, and although I think it's impractical, I do think that burst and automatic handguns are pretty interesting. Now next up today, we've got an expansion of how ugliness works in the game. This new system will allow ugliness to be assigned to specific body parts, and then depending on your clothing, you will be able to mitigate some of its effects. So to break this down, basically ugliness is a factor for how your character interacts with NPCs. That's like the only thing it really affects as far as I know. And we have a series of traits in the game that can make you pretty or ugly, which then factors into the success chances for dialogue checks. So Vanera here has added the ability to assign ugliness to body parts rather than just some overall nebulous ugliness that we have now. And since it will be based on body parts, you may be able to cover up the part that makes you ugly and therefore not be penalized as harshly in NPC interactions. Miley also said that they were planning to remove several of the pretty/ugly traits and have this tied to specific mutations instead. But that's the gist of things. This is basically just the implementation of this new system. It has not yet been expanded to work with all of these mutations. That is something that will come down the road. Overall though, this is pretty interesting, and it obviously makes sense that you would be able to cover up your prettiness or ugliness with clothing. I mean, God knows I do that in real life with my mask, and I keep my hood up at all times. Moving along now, next up from, I'm gonna say Cavernous. I don't know how to say your name. We've got the addition of a dive shop, which is a new location with, you guessed it, diving related gear. Now there's not much I have to say about this. It's just been a while since we really talked about a new location, so I thought I'd toss it on the pile for the show. It's pretty standard as a shop. It doesn't look too crazy or have anything bonkers going on. Some of the variants do have a pool in the back, which might be valuable if you're nearby and you haven't found a good place to gather barrels full of water. However, the main draw of this location is the gear that can appear here. And for me personally, I would never really wear swim or scuba gear. Mostly I'm just after the neoprene that you can take it apart for. Neoprene has always been a bit tricky to find in the game, especially in larger portions, and this dive shop really makes that a lot easier. In all of my testing, pretty much every location that I went to had at least one wetsuit, which is a very large garment that gives a lot of neoprene when you take it apart. Other than that, I don't have a whole lot to say about this location. I do have one suggestion. If you look at the shop in the game, it looks like it's actually very light on items. However, that's actually not the case. There are plenty of items that spawn here. They just tend to spawn on 1 or 2 tiles rather than being spread out across all the racks. Now I do want to say as well that this was the first piece of content that this person made. There's really nothing wrong with it being this way, but it is a bit strange when you're used to seeing things spread out throughout a store. Next up from Senpai Slime, we've got a change to the miscellaneous repair kit. Now this has always required a wood saw, which was by far the most elusive tool required to craft the item. Now, however, it can use bow saws in lieu of the wood saw component. And to be honest, bow saws are still pretty uncommon, so this is not a huge change, but 2 possible components is better than 1 specific requirement. So I just thought I'd mention it. I really don't have much to say about this. Next up from Miley, we've got something that I can't think of an easy way to sum up in 1 sentence. But basically there were 2 traits in character creation called Forgetful and Good Memory, which claimed to affect how quickly your skills rust. And the code said that the impact was 33%. We just talked about this in my video about theoretical and practical skill and skill rust. However, apparently these traits were not actually hooked into the code properly, so they didn't actually do anything. Well, now Miley has gone in and made it so that they actually work the way that they say they work. So again, this is a 33% reduction or increase to the rate at which your skills rust, so there you go. Next up from Highmore246, we've got a change to unarmed weapons. This PR removes the unarmed flag, which was previously how a weapon was determined to use the unarmed skill rather than the melee whatever weapon skill. Instead, you will now wear these unarmed weapons rather than wielding them. Now, I don't think that I've ever used the unarmed skill in this game, or if I did, it was many, many years ago. Martial arts and unarmed are like the main area of the game that I just don't have any experience with. So I'm an outsider, don't judge me, but I think this change makes sense. If we pull unarmed damage from what you're wearing, then in theory, even just throwing on a pair of gauntlets would increase your unarmed damage, and that seems like a good change to me. Now, I'm not sure if this actually hit every single unarmed weapon in the game or not, and I don't know if this will be a liked or disliked change. I don't have experience with it. I just wanted to point it out, even if I don't actually have a lot of feedback. So yeah, drop me some comments, let me know how you feel about this, and certainly if you have experience with unarmed combat, that. I'm interested in your take. And additionally, of course, there will be a link to the PR in the description down below if you want to read about it and get more information. I'm sorry I'm not really able to convey these things to you. Moving on now, next up, we've got a brand new martial art. And this comes from, I'm sorry, I'm pretty well guaranteed to say your name wrong. I'm going to say Santos Valorian. Anyway, this adds Bojutsu, which is a Japanese martial art surrounding staffs. Staffs? Staves? Okay. The martial art allows the use of several staff weapons, probably most notably the quarterstaff. That is by far the easiest one to make and will most likely be your go-to starter weapon for using this style. It can also use the long pole, and I wanted to mention this because you should not confuse that with the long stick that we have in the game. The long pole is the one that you make for use with spears and pikes. But anyway, back to the martial art. It comes with a variety of techniques. Feel free to browse through the PR if you want to see all the options that will be available to you. And I only really mention this because the quarterstaff is a go-to weapon for many people in the game, and because, hey, Bojutsu is pretty cool. It's also pretty rare that we get new martial arts, so I'm sure that people will be very happy to see this added, and obviously it gives you something new to try out. So yeah, get out there and try some staff combat. And then finally today, let's talk about armor really quick. Aaron recently updated the touring suit to use the new pocketed armor system, which I still have not talked about and is a big part of why I feel like I'm falling behind in this series. But anyway, the touring suits now look like pretty great armor. However, leather was also recently changed in terms of protection values. Initially, leather had its armor values nerfed, but they're in the process of being raised back up. So depending on the version that you're playing right now, you may find that your leather gear is a lot less protective than it once was. However, that said, the touring suit still looks like a pretty good piece of gear. Additionally, from Bombastic Slacks, we got a tweak to the Nomad gear in the game. Now, I'm not familiar with this gear. It's obtained through interactions with the Exodii and then crafted by the player. So no spoilers or anything, they are relatively new and most people have not seen or used them yet. The Nomad changes seemed specifically related to pockets, so the protection values and whatnot have not changed as far as I know. And with that, internet, I think we are done for the day here. Again, short video, sorry about that. I just, if I'm being honest, I've been a little bit overwhelmed lately. And like I said, I've been falling behind in my coverage of this show in particular and just the game in general. I'm going to work to be better about that, but also, again, I'm taking 2 weeks off YouTube here. So very likely the next major video that goes up on the channel will be the continuation of this series. But other than that, yeah, 2 weeks of no content. So everyone, thank you so much for watching. Hopefully this video helped you in some capacity, maybe pointed out something that you did not know had been added to the game. And yeah, I'll be back in a couple weeks with another video, so thanks for being here and I'll see you next time.